Welcome back to Level Up, because you don't know what you don't know. I'm John Cale. I'm the host of the show. Hey, I appreciate you taking time to come back to our podcast today. And I hope that you've been thinking through some of the things from our last podcast. And I want to remind you that the podcast is specifically designed in a unique way for you to get value in your life. There's a lot of things you can listen to out there that will give you lots of stuff of entertainment, things that are funny. You may see some things you don't know. But at the end of the day, the purpose behind this podcast that we've talked about since the beginning is that you come to a place and you have value added to your life when you leave. So there's something for you. Either you're going to learn something new that you don't know, or you're going to learn something new to something you do know and add on to your knowledge. So appreciate you being here today. Today we have a two-part series, and we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Todd Iannetta. Todd, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
We appreciate you being here. Todd is the lead pastor at the Silver Creek Church in Aurora, Ohio. And not only is he the lead pastor there, and not only is that a church, but it's the church I attend as well. So Todd is my lead pastor, senior pastor of our church. I've known Todd now for probably 3-4 years, and significant things are happening at this church. One of the things that happened was I was looking for a place for my son, who was in middle school at the time, to find a place of very deep spiritual teaching and truth biblically as he went through his junior high and then into his high school years. And there are a lot of great youth groups out there, and some teach a lot and some don't teach very much. But one of the things that impressed me here about Silver Creek was the depth of their team and their approach with young people. And they're very serious about them learning who God is and having a relationship with him. Obviously, if they start high school and have their head on straight spiritually, right? It's not that they're going to live perfect, right? We both have teenage sons, so we understand they don't live perfect lives, right? But they stay between the rails, hopefully, between the guardrails on the road.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
So anyway, it was impressive to me how thorough they are in putting information in front of these young people. And then the church, and he can talk more about this as well, but the church in the past 3 years, right, has grown from pretty much maybe 50 or 100 people-ish to close to 600, 700 people on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, but when I started, I think we were coming out of COVID for one, but I think we had, we were probably more like 200 to 300 people, but yeah, but we've been growing by about 15% kind of year over year ever since. It's been unexpected growth. Yeah. It's been amazing.
Yeah. This is no joke. There was 3 services. There is an 8 o'clock, 9:30, and 11 o'clock on Sundays. So kind of fit your lifestyle, right? If you're looking to attend. But what's really interesting is we attend the 11 o'clock most of the time. And literally, I'm not kidding you, I drove around the parking lot 3 times and ended up parking in an area with bushes, and because the service was so full. And that's not a bad thing. This is a good thing. Right. But that tells you that something is happening there. And what I will tell you is, if you don't go to church and you think all these crazy things about church, this episode is really designed for you. This is not a deep theological episode. This is an episode where we're going to talk about stuff that you think about that you have never been able to ask. And we're going to get some answers on that, and we're going to give you truth, okay, to help with confusion. But I will tell you that if you come visit this church, if you come to Silver Creek and you walk in, it's the kind of church that when you walk into the entry, you will say, whoa, because it is so different. You don't feel like a stranger. You don't feel that I don't belong. You feel that you're with normal people, and you don't have to prove anything. And then when you get into the main part of our services with our band and Todd and the other staff speaks, you will sense and feel something, I promise you, that you don't normally feel. And you'll wonder, what is this and how do I get more of it? And I'm sure you've heard those similar things from people, right? As they come to visit.
Yeah, we want people to feel like when they come in that it feels like home. Like this is a place that you can belong, and there's a message for you that's not just this message that doesn't feel relevant but it's exactly what you need with where you're at in your life right now.
Right. And I wanted to take a minute to talk about the church because it's been so impactful in my life personally, as well as in my family's. And so I wanted to at least share a little bit about that. And Todd's going to talk more about these things. We're going to have questions that he's going to answer. And I'm really, really thankful that he's here today because there's an amazing amount of experience and knowledge here in ministry and as a pastor. And when I say basic, there are probably many of you that hear the word pastor and go, what does that mean? Right? Like, what's a pastor? I don't even know what that means. What's this guy do? So we're going to break this way down, right? This is going to be so simple for you to understand. And then the second session, we're going to deal a little bit more with the whole thing about church and God and the complexity of how hard things have been made for you to understand. And we're going to make it so simple that you're going to be like, are you serious? That's it. Right. And I think you'll be surprised. So 2-part episode. Todd's going to talk a little bit about his background growing up, how he got into church work. What's a pastor? Why should you care about a pastor or a church? And it will be a simple conversation. How do I really meet God? Right. Do you know that you can meet him? Have you ever realized bigger than a Bible story, bigger than things when you were taught in Sunday school and you heard those stories and they kind of blended in with Christmas and, Easter things that were stories about the bunny and Santa Claus, and all of it to you maybe sounds like they're all stories. But listen, today, what we're going to talk about is not a story. These are events. These are facts. These are things that really happened that are very real today and you can experience personally. And so I'm very excited for us to get to that. One of the things I would mention, and Todd, that I've told people in the episodes since we started this podcast, was that we talk about real issues in life, but outside of that, we always have to remember that there's a spiritual side to us. And if we only talk about relationships and expectations and divorce and whatever we talk about, drugs, if we only talk about those things, those are things, right? Those are issues that we can deal with. But if we neglect the spiritual side of us, which all of us are created, right? Equal, we're created. And so there is a spiritual forever part within all of us. And if we don't pay attention to that, it can become a huge problem, especially when we aren't walking on this planet anymore.
Yeah.
And so I've always talked about that. And today we're going to talk about the spiritual side and the spiritual aspect of our lives, because you will live forever. You are going to live forever. And it's up to you where you're going to end up. That choice is yours. And we're going to help you understand more about that. Let me ask this question. What's the biggest risk that you've ever taken? I think all of us have taken risks. And I guess I would ask you, have you ever taken a really big risk? Have you, are you a bettor or are you a gambler and you've put a pretty big wad up there and took a big risk and lost it all? What are things that you've risked and you've maybe gotten burned on? The one thing I would say to you today, and I think Todd would totally agree with this, is when we're talking about your eternity and where you're going to live forever, you do not want to roll the dice and hope that they come up right. You want to know where you're going, because when you stop breathing here, you don't get to make that choice. Okay. It's made for you. You've already made it while you were here. And so we really want to talk about this. And I want you to realize today that you can know that you're ready whenever that day may come. Now, some of you watching today may say, hey, I'm 20, I'm 19, I'm 35, I'm 40, whatever your age is. And I don't even have to worry about that because I'm young. Well, folks, I just want you to understand something, right? In a perfect world, in a perfect lifespan, you're right. But I can tell you there are circumstances that take place where things happen that affect our lives and the people's lives around us. And we just don't know what tomorrow may hold. And so right. I want you to think about that. I have some statistics that I want to share with you today regarding church and God in our current culture. I thought it would be helpful to share a couple things about the culture. So 45% of people 18 to 29 years old claim to be Christians. So 45%, so over half of the culture, this generation, doesn't claim to be Christian. The the thing that's interesting is just because they claim to be Christian, it doesn't necessarily mean that they know Jesus, right? Christian might mean I'm not Catholic, or I'm not Lutheran, or I'm not something else, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have a relationship with God. And I would say to you, it would be much like people that you know. You know a lot of people. You have a lot of acquaintances. We have lots of people we know. But when I say to you, how many of all the people that you know do you really have relationships with? That's a different story. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, most people say if we have enough close friends that make up one hand, 5 people in our life, we're fortunate that are real friends through anything with us, good, bad, ugly, they're with us. So I want you to understand the difference between knowing something and an acquaintance and really having a relationship with somebody. That's a really big difference. Yeah. 15% of Gen Z attend church, period. Only 15%. So 85% of the generation doesn't even attend church. And the answer, the question is why would that be? And we're going to talk more about that. One of the things I found really interesting was that females are more affected by this. It's the females that lead the charge of not attending, and while guys are currently attending at increasing rates.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So the Gen Z guys are coming into church, and the females are standing back going, I'm not sure, right? I don't know that I want to get into that. So the question is, why is this happening? Well, every so often, Todd, I have in the podcast pretty consistently have a word of the day that kind of oversees what we're talking about. So the word for today is confusion. This is why we're seeing statistics like this, because people are extremely confused. When you get confused, you become very frustrated, right? Facts get crazy and you don't know what direction to go. And I think for a lot of us, what we'll end up doing is we'll short circuit and make a decision in confusion. And sometimes it's not the right one. And so I think for many of the folks who are watching here today, I think that your belief, I think the things that you perceive as truth may be short-circuited decisions that you've made because there was all this information that you had and you were confused. And so in order to settle that, you kind of short-circuited and made some decisions. The challenge with that, folks, is that when you do that, you risk the fact that you may not be making the right decision. It may be the wrong choice. And what I want to remind you of again today is this. We're talking about your forever, right? And peace in your life. And if there's one thing you want to really know about, it's that. Okay. So let's move on. There are a couple things I thought, Todd, I know I shared this with you as well, but I thought that if I could set a baseline today as we talk and you share, it would be really good to have people come to some base thoughts and then agree that, hey, I'm gonna come with these glasses on as we talk over the episode and in the next episode. So here are the things I want you to think about. I'd like you to consider these things as we continue this episode and then we move into the second episode. Number one, I want you to consider the fact that the Bible is factual and historically correct. All right. It is true. It is not just a novel. It is not just a book. It's factual and historically backed up as well. Secondly, there's a historical documentation that Jesus was here and that he rose from the dead. Okay? Third thing is evil does exist. Satan, who hates God. And what I want to say here, right? And Todd, if you want to add something here, please. What I will talk about this, and you may never hear anybody say this. You may never hear anybody mention Satan or evil, right? Well, the reason I'm mentioning this is because this is really the big problem, right? You and I are nobodies to him, right? We're God's creation. God loves us, but to Satan, we're just little pawns that he tries to move around on the board of life, right? Why? Remember this. Satan in the Bible was one of the highest beings in paradise past, okay? He was one of the highest. And somehow I can't answer the question why, because many of you are probably going, well, what happened? Todd can probably go deeper than me for sure. What I can tell you is he fell out and he decided that he was going to take over heaven from God. Somehow there was arrogance and pride. And I don't understand. I just being honest, I don't. But he got a third of the angels to try to rebel against God. And he was cast down. This is in the Bible. There are scriptures that specifically talk about it. His name was Lucifer. It even appears that he was involved in worship and in music in the heavenly realm. And a third of the angels were cast out. And he is never going back there. So why is it a big deal? Because the fight isn't really with us. The fight is with him and God. He hates God because he'll never get back. He's been cast out. He rejected God. And the only way for him really to show his ultimate hate is for him to hurt us, because we are God's prized creation. We are the pinnacle. God made us because he wanted relationship with us.
Absolutely.
And so I want you to understand that, because the fight isn't between us, or it's not about how many times you pray or how much money you give, or can you be good enough, or who's right or who's wrong. It really comes down to, it's a spiritual war that we live in, right? That's around us. And I want you to realize the battle is for you, against you, only because you're a pawn trying to get back at God from his point of view.
Okay. Yeah, John, I would just say that I think that what happened with Satan was that he wanted to be God, right? He was, and I think that is actually the original sin, is that, and it's in all of us, is that what the worst of our sin isn't what sometimes people think. The worst of our sin is that we want to be God. We want to take the place of him. We don't believe his way is better than ours. And I think that's what happened with the fall of Satan. But then Satan tried to take us down with him, by basically tempting Adam and Eve with the same thought. God said, don't eat this, don't eat of this tree. God doesn't know what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. It's going to be better for you if you do. And he's twisting what God said. And so Adam and Eve go, oh, maybe God isn't as great as we thought that he was. And so let's just do our thing. Yep. And bam, he got him right there, you know? And so I think it's great that you start there, because I think that's exactly where the story starts. It's the number one seat. That's what God wants, right? If in our heart, right? Yeah. That's exactly what you're saying. He wants us to love him and do what he wants, and we want to be, in essence, God of our own life, right? By doing what we want to do. Exactly. Why? Because we're all human. We all are human, right? Yeah. We have desires and senses and all of those things. Thank you. That's really good stuff. The other thing I want you to place and consider today is that you will live forever after death. I want you to come to the point where you understand that today. Put that through your lens. And then the last piece is, be willing to admit that if you see something new, you're willing to do something different to prove the reality of God personally in your life. So as we're talking today, and all of a sudden you have a thought or something, feeling or whatever, something that's just beyond anything you felt or sensed or thought before, be open to that, because Todd nor I have an ability to get inside your body. Okay. If that happens to you, it's a very good sign that you are making a connection with God and his spirit. And I want you to be open to that, because the very fact that you're listening to this podcast could be a life-changing event for you. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit, some questions, Todd, of some different things in life. Can you take a minute and maybe just paint a picture of your upbringing? Maybe give us a quick synopsis of your family and your upbringing, just so people know your background. Yeah. So I was born into a home where my parents were Christians, so they started bringing me to church, in the womb. I was at church, and so I knew church. I knew how to play church. I had 3 older brothers that all taught me what to do wrong, and what to do right. And so I was able to watch everybody and kind of be a good kid growing up. So I kind of knew how to play church. I knew how to be the Christian kid that God wanted me to be. And I even would say, I think I believed the stuff when I was young. But what happened for me is when I was in high school, it became there was a sticking point. There was a crossroads for me where I'm going, do I really believe this stuff? Or is this just what my parents have brought me up to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has to face that at some point, whether you grew up, in a believing home, in a faith-filled home or not. You're going to come to this place where you go, is this what I believe? Is this what I think? Or is this just what's been kind of trained up in me? And that was a turning point for my life, was probably freshman in high school when God really began to go, hey, this is real. This is what you were made for. And that was a turning point where I could have gone either way at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So
one of the things I was going to ask you, was there a moment that something happened that you knew God was real? Like, can you remember was there a crisis point that you think of, like a mile marker back in your life where, wow, this was a turning point for me, where, whether it was that year or maybe a little later, I mean, anything there you could share?
Yeah. Well, I would share just a couple crisis points. Now, number one, what I believe about, when God has made himself more real, it was always born out of adversity and trials and challenges. And I think that is a consistent theme in the Bible. I think it's a consistent theme in my own life. So I would actually go all the way back to one of the most significant things that happened for me in my faith was when my dad became a Christian. And I didn't appreciate it at the time, but my dad found himself as a divorced 30-ish something, pretty lost, pretty broken. His dad had passed away when he was really young, and my dad was introduced to Christ, and his life was changed forever. And so I say all that to say, being born into a home where not only did he tell us that Jesus was important, but he actually lived it, is what made it so real for me. Because I was like, I've told him recently, my dad's definitely one of those, giants, mentors in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I've said, you didn't just teach me about Jesus, but you actually made him look good. Which is
cool.
Which is a reason why I think a lot of people don't want to believe, because the person they know that's connected to Jesus is, didn't make Jesus look very appealing by the way that they lived their life.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start there, but then I would also say, as a freshman in college or a freshman in high school, that point where I had people in my life, again, not just my dad, because at that time, I not really listen to my dad as much. He's not as cool. But
you and I get that right now. We both have teenagers,
right.
as I mentioned.
Yeah. So you need those. You mentioned our church's student ministry. You need those guys, those people,
yes,
in your life who are really, hopefully, saying some of the same things your parents are saying, but you're hearing it differently. And I think for me, that was huge. I had there's a couple guys I can think of. My youth pastor at the time, Ted Cruz, talked so much about, this is not a religion. This is a relationship with God. And it was like that combined with the fact that he was relational with me.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about Jesus, but he's investing in my life and other people investing in my life. That was what made God so tangible and real for me.
Mm-hmm.
And began even what happened, the reason I was called into being a pastor.
Well, I'm going to make a comment on that, but my next question was, can you talk to us about the road that led you to becoming a pastor? Like, and for some of you, again, you may be going, pastor, what's that mean? I mean, I get it, right? There's a lot of people in the culture today who know nothing about church or any of the words, right, around church. But one of the things that you said there really struck me, and I've had that experience in the church here with my son. Shout out to Logan, who works with the teenagers.
Yeah.
And he has actually called my son, texted my son, called him and set appointments to actually meet with him and have a lunch with him and invest his life and his time in my son and his spiritual life. And, as a Christian, sure, I want my kid to have fun playing basketball. I want my kid to enjoy his life as high school, because you come this way once, right? and then it's gone, and then you're standing there like a kid freezing to death in the rain outside, shaking, going, now what? Right? Like, what am I going to do?
Right.
I graduated. Oh my gosh. But the point is, the most important thing for me, for my son, and I'm sure for you as well, is that he knows God and that he fulfills the role that God put him on this planet to do. Because as you do, I believe that they're here for a reason.
Yeah.
But to your point, the influence that was in your life, I'm seeing that through the ministry of our church right now with my own son. And it's
That's
just,
awesome.
It's impactful. It's very impactful. So talk to us about the road to becoming a pastor, what that meant to you. And I guess I would roll this other question with that too. So you could just, these two kind of go together, like answering that call. Like when you became a Christian, was it hard for you to make that decision to follow God, right? As a pastor? I know I remember dealing with God, dealing with my life. It was always scary to say to God, yeah, I'm in, no problem. Because you always feel like God's going to put you in a field in Africa surrounded by lions, and you're going to, like, it's going to be horrible. You're going to starve. And so if you could share, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would say my road and journey to ministry, it really did start with those people in my life, my youth pastor, other guys, like you mentioned, Logan, in your son's life, that just invested in me. And for me, and I would encourage people to, if you ever feel like you're called to ministry, which, you need to explore that and take some steps and see what else God's doing. It was a process of elimination for me too, because I'm looking at, I didn't have a lot of other interests. No subject in school was like, real passionate thing for me. And so, but the biggest thing is I want to do what these guys have done for me. I want to do that for other people.
Okay.
I mean, okay. I want that kind of, I fell in love with Jesus. And I thought that's the most important thing for people. And how are they going to know if I don't spend that kind of time, with them? And so my original calling was actually student ministry. I did that for, I think 12 years or so. And I never imagined I would actually be like a lead pastor. I didn't have that, I didn't have that road mapped out and planned. I just kind of did the next thing that I felt like God wanted me to do along the way. And somehow he's led me to this point, through that.
So what's really cool, what I heard you just say was that you were motivated into ministry because of the reality of what somebody else showed you.
Yeah.
God, who Jesus was.
Yeah.
The relationships that you had moved you and impacted you so significantly that it moved you to want to do that and reproduce that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would say that started and has continued from the day Jesus came down to this earth. Because what these guys were doing and what I've tried to do with people is like exactly what Jesus did. Is he actually stepped down from his throne to this earth, put on flesh to come be with people. And we call that incarnational ministry, right? You're with people. And that's what made the biggest difference for those first disciples. And ever since then, that's been the impact of Christianity, I think, is relational, incarnational ministry, not just telling people what to believe, but showing them, being with them, walking with them. So
I keep hearing what you said just a few minutes ago, which I thought was a very, very powerful statement. And I've not really heard anybody say what you said the way you said it. And that was that sometimes as Christians, we don't make Jesus look real good. Kind of like in a marriage, right? We try to make, but we don't bash our spouse in front of people, right? We don't, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that what you said there goes back to the key word that we're talking about, which is confusion. I think that's why so many of you who are watching the podcast today have, 200 questions, and you just kind of are immobilized by those questions and no one's answering them. And so therefore this part of your life, this spiritual part of you, you just leave over here kind of abandoned and surrounded by these questions. And someday I'll deal with that. And I guess what I would tell you is a lot of that confusion can come from people doing things in the name of God or in the name of Jesus. And we live in a world, as you know, Todd, and our viewers know, that there's a lot of stuff that's deception and what's real, right? Like you literally can watch the news on this channel and here's a story. And then you can watch the news on this channel and here's a story. Yeah. And they're opposite stories. Like this person did this. Nope. This person didn't do this. Right. So what's truth? And this is the generation that our listeners are growing up in. Yeah. For us, when we grew up, it wasn't like that. There was more integrity. It wasn't as bad as it is today. And so I think that's part of the confusion is so many people in the name of God or in the name of Jesus do things. And then people say, I don't want anything to do with that. Right. Right. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was to present truth and present things to put for people to hear and listen to that are truth and may help them to see things differently and unwind some of that confusion. So thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Are there a couple things, Todd, in your life, a couple choices, and I would say good or bad, that you made in your earlier years that have kind of shaped who you've become? Any choices with that were like places where the wheel went whoosh, and it was good or bad, right? Yeah.
I'll start with the bad.
Okay.
For me, like I told you earlier, I was a pretty compliant kid. So I was a good kid. I did the right things outwardly. My struggle was always inward. So it wasn't very difficult for me to realize like my own sin, early on. And, I think, I know this is not like unlike maybe other people's stories, but sometimes pastors don't share this stuff. Like I saw my first porn when I was 11, at a friend's house. Mm-hmm. I think that age is going down, but I think that wrecked me and derailed my life for a while, and then on and off, for probably over a decade, 10, 15 years of just the battle of lust and porn. And I think, so that decision did a couple things for me. One, it revealed what I'm capable of, as a human being. Mm-hmm. And so sin just became a reality, and everybody else thought I was this great kid.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
But I actually had some pretty deep issues. And so that was a bad choice. I will say like, I'll get back to that later. I'll go back to your question though, with other choices. I would say, the good choices that I've made is that once I found Jesus and began a relationship with him, I think the two things that made every bit of difference and have been since, have been, one is to get used to actually getting to know him myself. So choices to actually read the Bible on my own and consistently. And I think it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to lose that. But part of a relationship with God is that he speaks to you, but he speaks to you through the word. Mm-hmm. And so you can talk back to him, but I think people are like, I've never heard from God. Well, I'm like, God has spoken. He's spoken everything through the Bible as his primary means of speaking. And I think he can still speak through other people. He can speak through other things. Don't get me wrong, but I think we can't neglect this amazing gift that's been given to us in his word and expect that we're going to hear from him. And so that's been huge. And then the second thing is just, this is good and bad. The times in my life that I've surrounded myself with people who didn't love God have been harder for me. I didn't have the community that was pushing me towards him. And then the times in my life where I did do that, I was growing so much more. Community, surrounding myself with the right community and reading God's word, essential.
That's good stuff. I associate with your story around the whole porn issue, because that's something that at a very young age somebody exposed me to as well. I can't remember. I might have been like 8.
Yeah,
and it's for the guys who are out there. I'd say for the girls who are out there, you hear this, and maybe some of you are like, well, yeah, what's the big deal, right? And or yuck or weird or whatever. But I think a lot of the guys who may be watching this resonates, with them. And it's not just something that happens once in your life and it's over. It can plague you for decades of your life, kind of like alcoholism, right? It's an addiction. It can become an addiction.
Yeah.
It's just a hidden one.
It is,
compared to alcohol and outward actions or drug abuse. So thank you, Todd, for sharing that, because that's very real. And it's something that, for me, has been, it's a struggle. I mean, it's something that you can't unsee things, right? And you can't unhear things.
Yep.
That's why we have to be careful with what we say to people, because we can say we're sorry, but man, it's hard to unhear something. Right?
Well, it's a powerful addiction, and this is a sad thing to admit, but I told you that the first porn I watched was at age 11. I can tell you what it was. I can tell you about it.
Yeah.
All the movies I saw when I was 11, I can't tell you what I watched.
Yeah. But that stands out.
That stands out. And that's because it is, it's scientific, right? It is like a dopamine hit. It's like a drug when you take that stuff. And so it is addictive. And it's interesting because for a while, I think back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Christians were kind of leading the charge in actually talking about, hey, this is bad.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do this. In the last 10 years, maybe more, but everybody's saying that. Everybody's like, hey, porn's actually bad, whether they believe in God or not. Because in this, what's happening right now is the reason people are saying that is they're going, I finally wanted to have sex with somebody and I can't even perform now because, and then you get on the radio and you listen, I listen to sports radio, and every other ad is a performance enhancing, thing, because I believe, I know there are other reasons why people need help with sexual function, but I think that's a huge reason why. Yeah. Is because people have been desensitized to what sex even is because of porn. But
it becomes more real to you than a person in front of you who's real to you.
Absolutely.
And which then causes the issues that you're actually talking about. So, hey, this is an adult show. This is not.
I was hoping.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's not. We're not checked on the box for kids only or anything like that. So, no, listen. As I've said from the beginning, man, we want to talk about real stuff here, and the goal is to help people. Right, that's the real goal. Why I'm doing this, and why I have you here today as well. So I'm glad that we are able to chat a little bit about that. Let me ask this. And then I want to move on to our final piece for this episode, because these are both really good things. But how do you know that God is with you and is real? I think that's a question that people would be interested. Like if you were to talk with the average guy watching or somebody, and and they're like, all right, Todd, how do you really know God's with you? What would you say to them?
That is a great question. I would say, number one, what we believe is not based on a feeling. It is based on an actual historical event that happened. So when we look at the life, the death, the resurrection of Jesus, it's not even just the Bible that affirms that actually happened. There are other historical documents. There's more evidence historically that Jesus was a man who walked the earth, who died a criminal's death by crucifixion, and then his disciples found him alive. And the Bible actually says he appeared to hundreds of people before he rose from the dead. And so this is a real event. And so some people sometimes when they go, well, how do I know God is real? You can start with a lot of questions, but the question that I would encourage everybody to start with is Jesus real, and did he rise from the dead? So that's paramount. Now, then you have to realize, like, if he rose from the dead, then he can be God and everything that he says that he was.
Yeah. That's right.
But then I would say that the reason that I would add to that to say, the reason I believe in Jesus and I know that he's real and I know that he's with me is because I know that I am, in and of myself, I am so flawed. I cannot, my even as a pastor, like this isn't a story of like, I used to be a sinner and now I've arrived.
And you're perfect.
Yeah,
right.
I'm perfect now, right? Actually, I believe the more that you get closer to God, the more that you start to understand how flawed you are.
Yeah.
And it's not that, it's not that I'm like, sleeping around on the weekends and I'm like, that's right. The obvious stuff. It's that, the more you get to know God, the more you realize like, my motives can be bad. My thought life, I'm selfish beyond belief. And if in my mind, if there was no God, that wouldn't feel so wrong. This world wouldn't feel so broken. That we wouldn't look around and go, this is not the way it's supposed to be. We would never say that. We'd be like, well, this is just life and it's the way it's supposed to be. And it feels fine to me. But the whole story of God is that God sent Jesus down to actually make all of this right. And the thing that he wanted to make right more than anything else is me, is my soul that was so far from him because of what we said in the beginning, I want to be the God of my own life. Mm-hmm. That was the fall of Satan. That's the fall of humanity, is I want to be God. And what Jesus came to do is to say, there's only one God. And even though you have walked away from God trying to be God, I've come down to give my life in your place so that you could have a right relationship with God. So instead of like, God's here and instead of God's here and you're here going, no, I don't need you, God, I'm God. You flip it around, and now you're in this is exactly the way it was created to be. You trust him. He's got the best plans because he created you for that.
Mm-hmm. And the more, I think when you were talking about reading the Bible and spending time with God, and the longer that you're a Christian, right, the more, the longer that you know him, just like any relationship, right, that any of us have with anybody, the more time you spend with somebody, the more close the relationship becomes, the more you know them. I mean, your best friends, you know things about them, maybe the clothes they like, the foods they like, what they like to do for fun. And what I want to say here is this is not complex, right? At the beginning, I said this is simple.
Yeah,
that's what this is.
That's right.
It's the confusion that makes it complex, right? You have to walk away from the ball of confusion and decide,
absolutely,
I'm going to actually try to do something here. So, let me ask this. A couple times, I just want to get through a couple more questions with you. Let me just look here for just 1 second. I'm going to ask you this question, and then we're going to close this episode, okay? And we'll pick up on the second episode. What are some of the real things that you feel are keeping people from seeking God, from even caring about the fact that God's real? What are some of the things that you would say that's keeping people away?
Well, I think confusion is a great word that you used. I mean, I believe it's confusion with the people. They don't have another Christian in their life that's actually living like they're supposed to be living. And again, that doesn't mean perfect, right? But that means humble. That means doing what they can to grow closer to Jesus and being willing to admit when they mess up. And, they don't have those people. And so they're like, well, you can tell me about Jesus, but if I don't actually see it for real in somebody's life, it's not going to make a difference for me. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is, this is you kind of alluded to this, John, but I think politics has become so confusing for people. And unfortunately, politics has been, in some ways, very closely associated to Christianity, to where there are more people now that will say that they're Christians or check the box Christians because they have a certain political belief.
It's just meld together. Together.
And I just think in that, because of the polarizing political, climate that we're in right now, I mean, that becomes terrible because, politics, although it's a necessary thing in our world, and you can have views either way. And I think it's good to engage in it. It's kind of a disaster because you just have people who want your vote.
Yeah.
And so I think confusion and then I would even say distraction leads to confusion. So
that's good.
We're all over the place. We're getting all these messages from the culture. And I think the primary message from the culture lately is just saying, you just believe what you want to believe. And as long as you feel good about it, then you're good. And I think that's what's keeping people because from Jesus specifically, because Jesus does kind of make some claims where he goes, oh, actually, that's not true. If I rose from the dead and I am God, then there is a way to believe. There is a way to live. That's the best way for you to live. But I think our culture is like just opposite of that.
Yeah. You mentioned distraction, and when we think about spiritual life, right, and the spiritual side of who we are, if we can be distracted, it doesn't really matter by what, as long as we don't find the truth, right?
That's right.
Because we won't know God, we won't gain eternal life and forgiveness of our sin as long as we're distracted by whatever.
Yeah.
Which confuses us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody or these hypocrite people at church, or these people claim this, but they don't live it, or whatever, sports, your phone, social media, whatever in life distracts you and keeps your attention over here and doesn't allow God to be God in your life and really come there. So Todd, thanks so much for being here for this episode. We're going to get back together and do episode 2. One of the things that I would really, really like to challenge you who are watching with is the things that I ask you to consider up front. I'm going to kind of say, hey, this is homework. Okay. And I want to go over these again with you very quickly before we end, because I think if you will come to one with these things, that when you come back to episode 2, when we get back together again, it could be a big turning point in your life. So number 1, remember that the Bible is factual and historically correct. Todd mentioned that just a minute ago. It's more than a book. It's more than, oh, wow, the Bible says this. No, it's proven to be true. There is a book called The Case for Christ that I would tell any of you who are going, I don't believe any of this, go get that book and read it. Why? Because the guy who wrote that book was a Washington Post top journalist. And his wife became a Christian and started going to church, and she made fun of him. You know the story.
Yeah.
He made fun of her. Like, oh, you're going to church. Look at you. And after a period of time, he began to realize something is really different with my wife. Something's changed. Like he knew her better than anyone he knew. And he went on a quest for quite a while to travel around the world and prove either this was a true story, that Jesus and God and forgiveness and knowing him was true, or it's the biggest lie ever manufactured, right? Mm-hmm. Guess what happened, right? You know, but for you folks, he found that it's real and experienced God himself. And now he has the book for Case for Christ, which is a book that he explains that. And then he has another book called Case for Faith that followed that book as well. So that is something that I want to share with you. Remember also that evil does exist, that the reason we have to worry about this is because we're just little pawns on a board. The battle here is, there is no battle for God. He's already won. But we have an enemy who's trying to deceive as many of us as he can and keep us from getting our reward and our forgiveness and our place in eternity with God, because he knows he's never going back there. And so we need to remember that. Also, remember you're going to live forever after you die, and then be willing to admit between now and the next episode, and even in the next episode that you watch, that if you feel, sense, or hear something new that kind of sticks, like something that you feel like is a sticky note that got put on the front of your head and it just doesn't go away, pay very close attention to that, because Todd and I can't do that. We don't have the ability to do that and get inside and share those things with you. So I want to just tell you that what's coming up is our second episode will be next, Me, God, and Church. It's really simple. All right. That'll be episode 2. It's not as hard as you think. We're going to talk more about that and it becoming personal for you. I want to remind you that I would urge you to share the podcast with your friends. If you feel that you've got friends and family where this is relevant in their life, please share the podcast with them and enable them to get some help and get some knowledge on some things that may help them as well. I would tell you to please look us up out on social media. You can find us on social media, both in Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. And I would tell you, do something because of today. Don't just walk away, but please do something with what we've talked about today. Remember that you're very unique. There's only one you. And I'm John, and I'm out.